Have you ever wondered why the man you love, despite showing affection, pulls away or ignores you? Does his silence leave you questioning your worth or the authenticity of his feelings? It's a painful and confusing experience. But what if I told you that this behavior could be a sign of something deeper, something psychological and transformative? In this video, we're diving into Carl Jung's powerful analytical psychology to uncover why a man who loves you might withdraw emotionally. We'll explore the unconscious forces that shape his actions, including the projection of his inner feminine, the anima, and how love can awaken both the light and the shadow within him. By understanding these hidden dynamics, you'll realize that his withdrawal isn't a reflection of rejection, but rather an internal battle. He's facing one he might not even fully understand. This video will reveal how his silence is often a defense mechanism, a plea for time and space to process emotions he doesn't yet know how to express. Stay with us to learn how to transform this painful experience into a journey of self-awareness and emotional growth. By the end, you'll gain clarity on how love, even when misunderstood, can become a mirror for your healing and self-discovery. Don't miss this powerful insight that could change the way you view love and relationships forever. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. Carl Jung profoundly warns us that everything hidden within our unconscious minds eventually finds a way to manifest in the external world, especially in the most intimate of relationships. When a man truly loves, this love stirs not only his deepest desires and dreams, but also his most painful wounds, long-buried traumas, and paralyzing fears. This is what Jung refers to as the shadow. The shadow is not some external force, but rather the very parts of us that we have repressed or denied over the years. These aspects of the self-emotions, desires, impulses are often pushed out of sight because they don't align with the idealized image of who we think we should be. When a man falls in love, especially with someone who awakens profound feelings within him, his shadow inevitably comes to the surface. He begins to project onto her both his light and his darkness, all of the beauty and the terror he holds within himself. This process is deeply human and naturally occurs within the psyche, but it is not always easy to understand. It requires maturity to integrate both light and shadow, and that's where the challenge lies. The man may want to move closer to the woman, but often, instead of drawing nearer, he distances himself. True love is not merely about connection. It demands a transformation of the soul. To love fully, a person must confront everything they've hidden away, all the parts of themselves they fear or cannot accept. His soul knows this, but it doesn't make the process any easier. The thought of losing himself in the other, of surrendering control, and of giving up the emotional defenses he has spent a lifetime building up becomes overwhelming. The desire to preserve what little control he has left takes precedence over the connection he desires, and so he pulls away. When love touches these deep, often painful places, it triggers an emotional retreat, a form of self-protection. The impulse to ignore, to shut out, or even to act coldly is, at its core, an unconscious defense mechanism, his way of trying to preserve the fragmented identity he's built over the years. He is not consciously trying to hurt the woman. He's struggling with something much deeper that he cannot yet confront. When love activates the shadow, the man is thrust into an internal chasm, a space where he must choose. Will he face his wounds, or will he cling to the safety of his old patterns? Many aren't prepared for this kind of emotional confrontation, and so they flee. In these moments, silence, distance, and coldness are not a sign of a lack of love. They are often a reflection of a man who is desperately trying to process something he doesn't yet understand. For the woman who feels ignored, this can be devastating. The silence feels like rejection, and the pain of being pushed away can cut deep, especially if she is projecting her own unmet needs, desires, or idealized fantasies onto him. But here is where the shift can happen. If she can begin to understand that his withdrawal is not about her shortcomings, but rather about his internal battle with his own shadow, the situation can transform. It's not easy, but recognizing the psychological dynamics at play can help her stop personalizing the abandonment and start seeing the deeper struggle he is facing. True love, after all, is a journey of individuation. It's a process where both partners are invited to become the most authentic versions of themselves, shedding the layers of false identity they've carried for so long. As the bond deepens, so too does the awakening of childhood wounds, inherited patterns, and emotional defenses that were built as survival mechanisms. And this is necessary for growth because, as Jung so wisely understood, transformation can only happen through crisis. So, when a man who loves you withdraws, it's not because he doesn't care. He might be grappling with the fear of losing himself in you, of surrendering to the kind of love that demands more than he feels capable of giving at that moment. This is the painful yet beautiful paradox of love. It calls us to grow, to transform, and to face parts of ourselves we'd rather not see. In these moments of silence, when the pain of rejection feels too much to bear, remember that true love requires vulnerability. It requires us to confront the darkest parts of ourselves and learn to accept them. His withdrawal, painful as it may be, is an invitation to understand the deeper, hidden dynamics of love. Through this process, both partners can emerge stronger, more authentic, and capable of loving in a way that is both transformative and healing. What he truly fears is not the relationship itself, but the deep transformation it calls for, the need to change, to heal, and to integrate the shadow he has buried within himself. This is where love becomes both beautiful and painful, touching the soul in a way that does not just unite two people, but reveals the parts of us we'd rather leave hidden. Love is not merely about connection, it is about confrontation. It exposes the very essence of who we are, often unearthing wounds and fears that we weren't ready to face. And sometimes we are not prepared for the truths love reveals. But understanding the psychological roots of this behavior can be empowering. It is not about the power to control the other person, but the power to choose how you will position yourself in the face of this painful journey with awareness, compassion, and courage. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine archetype present within a man's psyche. It is the inner image that shapes how he perceives and relates to women. This archetype, built from emotional experiences with feminine figures in childhood, especially the mother, is not just a romantic idealization. It is much more than that. It is the gateway to the wholeness of his masculine psyche. But when a man is not yet aware of his anima, he unconsciously projects it onto the woman he becomes involved with. This projection creates relationships that are clouded by illusions, high expectations, and profound frustrations. When a man loves you and yet withdraws, he is often confronting that projection. You, the woman, come to embody everything he has long suppressed. The mysterious, the emotional, the sensitive. These are parts of himself that he was never encouraged to recognize or develop. You become a mirror for his most fragile and repressed emotions. He feels both drawn to you and threatened by you, the very parts of himself that he has kept hidden, buried under layers of emotional restraint and societal expectation, are suddenly reflected at him through you. The anima is not merely a romantic or idealized image. It carries much more than that. It embodies emotional chaos, the desire for fusion, intuition, sensitivity, forces that, when left unexamined, can stir deep confusion and fear. As you become the object of his affection, his love for you becomes the gateway that opens up this forgotten part of his psyche. But that awakening also triggers an internal crisis, one that threatens to tear apart the fragile self-image he has built. When he looks at you, he does not just see you. He sees everything he desires, everything he fears, and everything he has never known how to name. At first, this projection can be enchanting. He places you on a pedestal, sees you as unique, perfect, almost magical. But as time passes, as you begin to coexist and reveal your humanity, the projection starts to dissolve. This is when disillusionment sets in, not because you've changed, but because you were never what he projected onto you in the first place. What he loved was not you, but an inner image, a fantasy that needed to be reintegrated within him. And when the illusion shatters, he faces an emotional collapse. The fantasy falls apart, and with it, fear, discomfort, and withdrawal come rushing in. The wounded masculine is the man who is disconnected from his sensitivity, the one who has been taught to swallow his tears and suppress his emotions. Vulnerability was once seen as weakness, and now, when love forces him to face it, he finds himself ill-equipped to handle the depth of his feelings. By projecting the anima onto a woman, he approaches the most sacred and vulnerable part of his psyche. But without the emotional tools to cope with it, it's like opening a door to a universe he has never explored, one that screams with the intensity of all the emotions he's never been taught to embrace. He feels small, lost, confused, and so he flees. The pain of his withdrawal is immense for the one left behind. But his pain is real, silent, and hidden. It is the emptiness of not knowing who he truly is, of not understanding his emotions, and of being unable to maintain a genuine connection with something that transcends logic and control. In these moments, when the man pulls away, understand that the silence he leaves in his wake is not just about you, it is about him. He is facing the most profound part of himself, and until he can confront it, he cannot offer you the love you deserve. It is not a rejection of you, but a deep, internal struggle with himself. This is the heartbreak of love. It reveals, it transforms, and it demands that we face the parts of ourselves we've spent years avoiding. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. He does love you, but at the same time, he fears you not for who you are, but for what you represent. You, my dear, are the call to transformation, to growth, to the kind of profound change that shakes the very foundation of his being. It's crucial to understand that this dynamic is not your fault. You did not create his crisis. This is his inner battle, something within him that he must face. But what you can control, what you have the power to do, is how you respond to this awareness. Instead of stepping into the role of the savior trying to rescue him, save him, or convince him to come back, perhaps the most powerful act of love you can show is to allow him the time and space he needs to face his journey, to work through the transformation that love has demanded of him. In this space of waiting and reflection, take the time to look inward. What did you expect him to be? What role has he been playing in your life, in your psyche? Love, after all, is not just an encounter of bodies, it is a mirroring of souls. This is why it's so important to understand the anima, the feminine archetype in masculine psychology. When we understand this dynamic, we begin to see his withdrawal not as rejection, but as a moment of crisis, an inner call for him to reconnect with his soul, to reintegrate lost parts of himself, and perhaps, in the future, to meet you again, not as projections or illusions, but as whole, fully realized human beings. When a man loves you yet still withdraws, his actions may seem absurd. But through the lens of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the act of ignoring is not simply neglect or disinterest. It is far deeper than that. It is a psychic defense, a protection against parts of himself that he is still unable or unwilling to face. To truly understand this behavior, we must look beyond the surface, acknowledging the unconscious mechanisms at work within him when he is confronted with the depth and power of love. True love is transformative. It shakes the internal structures he has built throughout his life, often shaped by emotional repression, rigid patterns of masculinity, and a deep, almost instinctual fear of surrender and vulnerability. When a man is thrust into a relationship that demands emotional presence, vulnerability, and authenticity, his inner system will often react with resistance. Ignoring you in this context is not an act of rejection. It is an unconscious attempt to maintain control over an internal reality that is starting to crumble. As Jung teaches us, the unconscious mind is dynamic. When we fail to integrate the deeper parts of ourselves, they manifest through symptoms, contradictory behaviors, defense mechanisms, and emotional reactions we can't fully comprehend. Withdrawal, silence, and sudden coldness are often expressions of this internal conflict. He cannot express what he feels because, for most of his life, he hasn't even learned how to feel fully. For many men, emotional language was silenced early on, taught to suppress their feelings, to remain stoic and distant. When love enters their life, carrying with it the need for a genuine, vulnerable connection, they react by closing themselves off. Silence becomes their defense mechanism, an escape strategy. It is so common for this type of man to have identified with the archetype of the rational, strong hero, someone who has learned that vulnerability is weakness and emotions are to be controlled, not expressed. Showing vulnerability, for him, feels like a threat to his sense of identity. He fears dissolving in the relationship, fears being swallowed up by emotions he cannot even name, and fears becoming dependent on something outside of himself that he cannot control. So, he withdraws, he ignores, even while he loves you deeply. True love requires surrender, and that surrender is the very thing that frightens him the most, for it stands in stark contrast to everything he has been taught about masculinity and strength. This emotional ignorance, this disconnection from his true feelings, is also fueled by the shadow, the part of the personality that Jung describes as the hidden, rejected side of ourselves. The shadow holds all the emotions, fears, and aspects of the self that we have been taught to disown or repress. These are parts of him: fear of abandonment, insecurity, repressed anger, jealousy, neediness, that are stored deep within his unconscious mind. And when love comes knocking at the door, it activates these very feelings, forcing him to confront the parts of himself he has long avoided. Silence becomes his way of avoiding this shattering encounter with his vulnerabilities. Yet, the act of ignoring can also carry a symbolic meaning. In many archetypal traditions, the hero must undergo a period of exile or a desert journey before he can rediscover his true self. This withdrawal, this emotional distancing, might be an unconscious movement inward, a way for him to reorganize his internal world, to process what is happening, to name what he is feeling. But when this process remains unconscious, when he doesn't know how to communicate his inner turmoil, the woman is left feeling the full brunt of his absence. The silence feels like rejection, but it is, in reality, a defense against the very depth of love he has yet to understand. In these moments, it is crucial to remember that love is not always a smooth, harmonious experience. It is messy, complex, and often filled with pain. But it is in this pain, in these moments of emotional distance and internal conflict, that the most profound transformations occur, not just for the man, but for both partners involved. The journey of love is one of growth, healing, and self-discovery, where both individuals are invited to face their shadows and become more authentic versions of themselves. In this sense, withdrawal can be seen as an unconscious movement inward, a deeply personal and internal journey that allows him to reorganize his emotional and psychological world. It's as though he is retreating into the depths of himself, trying to make sense of what is happening, trying to name what he feels, and seeking a way to process emotions he cannot yet fully understand. However, when this process remains unconscious, when he does not have the tools to communicate these inner battles, it becomes impossible for him to express what is happening within. And in the absence of that understanding, the woman is left feeling abandoned, rejected, and confused. She feels as though she's been left in the cold, left to navigate this emotional storm without answers, which is exactly where many relationships begin to unravel. The pain of silence is often perceived by the woman as a direct reflection of her insufficiency, her shortcomings. She may feel that she is not enough, that the love she's giving is somehow flawed, or that she has failed in some way. Yet, In reality, she is caught in a process that is far more his than hers. It's a deeply personal inner conflict he must face alone. This realization can be empowering for the woman, allowing her to break the cycle of pain and reaction that often leads to frantic attempts to seek answers, reassurance, or validation. Rather than chasing after him, pleading for him to return or fix the relationship, the most powerful act she can perform is to turn inward. She must reflect on what his behavior is truly awakening within her and how this mirrors deeper psychological patterns. The key to navigating this emotional storm lies in awareness, self-awareness. Jung taught us that whatever is not brought into consciousness will manifest in life as fate. If the man doesn't understand why he withdraws, why he ignores, or why he is unable to sustain the love he feels, he will inevitably continue repeating these patterns in his relationships, both with her and with others. If the woman does not understand the deeper dynamics at play, she risks hurting herself by trying to fix the situation, by trying to heal him or rescue him from his psychological patterns. The truth is, she cannot solve his internal crisis. Only he can do that, but she can choose how she responds to it. In this context, his act of ignoring her is not simply a sign of neglect or indifference. It is a desperate cry from his unconscious mind. It is a plea for time, space, and silence, so that he can reorganize his internal world. This is not easy, neither for the man nor for the woman who loves him. The woman feels the sting of his withdrawal deeply. She feels abandoned, rejected, perhaps even unworthy. But understanding that his behavior is part of a deeper, more complex dynamic can transform the pain into wisdom. Instead of seeing his silence as a personal attack or a rejection of her love, she can begin to view it as a call to greater self-awareness and emotional growth. This transformation is not about excusing his behavior but understanding it. It is about reframing the situation to see it for what it truly is, a reflection of his internal struggle, not a direct reflection of her worth. When faced with the silence of a man who loves yet withdraws, the woman is often engulfed in an emotional whirlwind. She experiences doubt, rejection, insecurity, anger, and neediness, emotions that feel overwhelming, all-consuming, and difficult to control. But it is in the heart of this emotional chaos that an invitation is hidden, a call to awakening, a prompt to consciousness. Jung teaches us that every meaningful encounter, especially the painful ones, is an opportunity for individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are by integrating the many polarities of your inner self. It is precisely at this moment, when the silence feels unbearable, that the woman has the chance to transform the experience into one of profound self-knowledge. The awakened woman is not someone who does not feel pain, but someone who chooses not to lose herself in it. She doesn't become consumed by his absence, nor does she collapse into despair. Instead, she sees this absence as an opportunity to reflect on her vulnerabilities, her attachment patterns, her fantasies of idealized love, and her deep-seated fears of abandonment. Rather than asking, "Why is he ignoring me?" she begins to ask, "What is this absence trying to show me about myself?" This shift in focus is both subtle and profound. Instead of looking outward for answers, seeking validation from the man, or trying to change his behavior, she starts to turn inward, observing her emotional triggers, reflecting on her past relationships, and recognizing how she may be projecting her own unmet needs onto him. It's in this introspection that she begins the healing process. She stops seeking answers from him and starts looking for them within herself. She recognizes that true love, real love, does not come from the other person. It begins within. The other person, in many ways, is merely a mirror, reflecting the parts of ourselves that we may not yet fully understand. The silence that once felt like an unbearable punishment now becomes an opportunity for inner listening. It is no longer something to fear, but something to embrace as a catalyst for growth. Instead of chasing after answers or pleading for his affection, the awakened woman learns to embrace the silence and the space it provides. She understands that his silence is not about her lack of worth, but rather a reflection of his internal battle. The withdrawal he is experiencing is part of a process he must undergo alone. He needs time to process, to heal, and to reintegrate the parts of himself that have been hidden or repressed for so long. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. This woman does not try to force answers or chase after someone who is distancing himself. She respects his process, not because she has lost her love for him, but because she respects herself enough to know that she cannot solve his internal struggles. She understands that sometimes the most loving thing she can do is to give him the space he needs to heal. And in doing so, she also gives herself the space to grow, to heal, and to strengthen her own identity. The awakened woman also becomes aware of her own shadow, the aspects of herself that she too has ignored or repressed. She realizes that just as he projects his anima onto her, she may have projected onto him the absent father, the idealized savior, or the partner who was supposed to fill the empty spaces within her. By bringing these projections into the light of consciousness, she ceases to be a hostage to unconscious patterns. Instead, she begins to choose more clearly and freely, recognizing that love does not complete her, it amplifies her. She is already whole. As she brings her own shadow into the light, she begins to see with clarity. The projections she once placed on him, the needs she once expected him to fulfill, are no longer burdens she must carry. She is free to choose the kind of love that aligns with her true self, a love that is not based on illusions or expectations, but rooted in authenticity and mutual growth. Through this process, the woman evolves into someone who no longer fears the silence, but instead welcomes it as a sacred space for transformation. She understands that this journey is not about waiting for the other person to change, but about embracing her right to heal, grow, and choose love on her terms. And in doing so, she becomes a beacon of strength, wisdom, and emotional maturity, capable of creating deeper, more authentic connections with herself and others. She becomes whole, no longer a half, searching desperately for completion in another person. The transformation that takes place when she turns silence into awareness is one of profound courage. It's so much easier to point fingers at him, to label him as cold, immature, or cowardly, to cast blame on his withdrawal. It's an instinct to protect ourselves from the sting of abandonment by making the other person the villain of our story. But the deeper, more transformative work comes when she looks inward, when she dares to explore the silent spaces and recognize how much this silence is awakening old, buried pains within her. It is within this confrontation with the parts of herself she has avoided that the woman's true power begins to emerge. Not a power that seeks to dominate, control, or manipulate, but a power that embraces the pain, observes it without judgment, and transforms it into wisdom. The awakened woman is receptive, yes, but she is not passive. She is sensitive and deeply attuned to her emotions, yet she is not so vulnerable that she loses herself in them. She feels deeply, but she does not drown in the emotions that surge within her. Instead, she holds them, examines them, and integrates them as part of her wholeness. She knows when to persist and when to let go. She understands that true love does not come from clinging desperately to someone, but from liberating both herself and the other person to be who they truly are. Love is not about holding on with white-knuckled intensity, but about giving the freedom to grow, to evolve, and to stand in the truth of who we are, even in the face of absence. And so, even when he withdraws, even when his silence looms heavy, she does not dissolve. Her love does not collapse under the weight of his absence. Instead, it expands, it deepens, it turns inward, and becomes more grounded in her sense of self. When the woman enters this state of consciousness, she completely shifts the relational dynamic. She is no longer chasing, pleading, or waiting for validation from the other person. She has become whole, and this wholeness radiates outward, altering how she interacts with the world and with the people in her life. The man, still trapped in his inner turmoil, begins to sense this shift. Whether he understands it consciously or not, he feels the impact of her transformation. His emotional withdrawal, his internal conflicts, are met with a woman who has stepped into her power, not to control or fix him, but to love herself fully. And often this shift in energy prompts him to reflect on his inner journey. It challenges him, even if he's not yet ready to face it, and it can inspire him to eventually confront the things within him that have kept him distant. The power of the awakened woman is quiet, but undeniable. It's not in her words or her actions, but in the way she lives her truth. She holds space for herself, and in doing so, she holds space for others to do the same. She no longer depends on external validation for her worth. Instead, she emanates her sense of self-worth, which is the most magnetic and healing force of all. As we wrap up today's discussion, I want to leave you with a thought. What has this journey of understanding love, withdrawal, and personal transformation taught you? What realizations have come to the surface about yourself, your relationships, and how you engage with the world around you? Have you seen how true power lies in embracing silence, turning inward, and understanding the deeper dynamics at play? I invite you to reflect on one key thing you've learned today, something that resonated with you, something that you can take with you and bring into your life. Whether it's about recognizing your projections, understanding how love transforms both partners, or stepping into your power, I'd love to hear it. Please share one thing you'll be practicing in your life from what we've discussed today in the comments below. And if you found value in this video, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We have much more insightful content coming your way, and we want you to be a part of our growing community. Your engagement means the world to us. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing what you've learned and how you plan to implement it in your life. Let's continue this journey of growth together.